In this video lesson, we're going to take a look at the basic concepts behind quantizing MIDI notes in Pro Tools. And what would apply here would apply not only in Pro Tools, but really almost any digital audio workstation. So let's go to our Event menu and go to Event Operations and get out Quantize. Okay, and let's see what we're working with here. We've got a piano note. Click on it with my pencil tool. Now that you've heard the note, I'm going to go ahead and go to the MIDI monitoring icon here, or play MIDI notes when editing, and turn that off so that when I click on the note, it's not going to make the sound of the piano every time. All right. Right now you can see that I've got a couple of things here. I've got note on and preserve note duration selected. I'm going to leave those to start with. And I've also got quantize grid at quarter note. Let me start by saying here the quantize grid that I have selected in Pro Tools in the Event Operations Quantize menu and the grid selection for my grid view in my track are not linked. They are separate things. So what I choose to quantize here is not related to what I'm seeing in the grid. So if I selected my grid to eighth note, you can see that I get an additional grid line, but that does not update anything here or relate to the quantized grid, which is quarter note. Let's go back to quarter note here, and I'm going to go ahead and just move this note a little bit late and quantize and just see what happens. There we go. It snaps it back to the grid. I'm going to grab it again, move it even a little bit later, see where it goes. Still snaps it back to the grid. Going to grab it again, move it even a little bit later than that. And now it snaps to the next quarter note grid. Let me scoot this out of the way temporarily. Go back to where I started. And now I'll slide that note a little bit early. And, oops, let's get that out again. And quantize that. There we go. And it snaps it there. And let me move it a little bit further this way. Apply, still snaps it back. Keep moving it more that way. And it snaps it to the next earlier quarter note grid. So exactly when does Pro Tools make the decision that it's either too early or too late to snap it to where I want it to go, which is measure 2, beat 1. All right? Well, let me change grid lines and show you here. Before I do that, let me go out and get the calculator here. Okay. As we remember, with ticks, our magic number is 960. There's 960 ticks per quarter note. Okay. So that means between here and here, there are 960 ticks. Well, let me change grid values here to eighth note. That also means, if I go to my calculator, 960 divided by 2 equals 480. So an eighth note divided into 2 is a quarter note divided into 2 is 2 eighth notes. So that means if I choose grids, that means there's 480 ticks before, 480 ticks after. So right at beat 1, beat 2, 480 before, 480 after. That is a total of 960 ticks, or a quarter note in value, quantized grid of a quarter. So when I choose quantized grid of one quarter note, it's looking out an eighth note early and an eighth note late, or 460 ticks early and 460 ticks late. Anything that is in between those grid lines, or in between this space here, is snapped to measure 2, beat 1, tick 0. And that's really that's the basics of it. The only things that change, of course, are then when I change my grid. So if I go to eighth note for my grid, now I'll change my quantization here. That means Pro Tools goes ahead and looks out. If an eighth note is 480 ticks, let's get out our calculator again. 480 divided by 2 is 240. So if I go ahead and grab my insertion tool, an eighth note divided by 2 is 240 ticks behind the eighth, or 240 ticks ahead. So either way, when I have eighth note quantization of eighth note grid selected, it looks 240 before, or 240 after, or basically an eighth note's worth of ticks, 480 ticks, before or after where my eighth note location is. Okay? So that's really the basics of quantization. If you just understand your note value and how Pro Tools or whatever your DAW is looks ahead and before that grid point or that grid center point, you're kind of good to go. All right? We'll continue on with more quantization features in the next lesson.